Welcome. I am Jan Toms, the Vice President of U.S. Development with Join Mayshad. Join Mayshad is an enterprise of brands for women by women, connecting women to each other and to the companies, causes, and organizations that champion equity for women professionally and personally. Today, you're watching our Mayshad Women in Money series brought to you each and every week. Please also make sure to check us out at joinmayshad.com, where you can learn about all of our upcoming programming, our series, our workshops, our opportunities for you too to become involved as a member. We're really thrilled about this conversation today because for so many different reasons, it's very, very timely. I'd like to welcome Caroline Abramo. Hi, Caroline.
Hi, Jan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Caroline is the Chief Investment Officer at PANA LCE, which stands for Low Carbon Economy Investments, which is the first WBE certified 100% women-owned emerging manager focused on solely dedicated to carbon efficient private and public investments. Close to over 30 years of experience in financial services, Caroline has spent time with Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse, BNP Paribas, and Lazard Asset Management. She has also served as an angel for 100 Women in Hedge Funds since 2000, and also serves as a board director for Wingspan Arts from 2012 to 2019. Welcome, Caroline.
Thanks again, Jan. So nice to be here.
So my first question to you is, at Mayshad, we talk extensively about our backstories and how what we do today is the magnificent sum of all of our parts and all of our histories and all of our professional and personal trajectories. And I would love for you to talk about, the work that you do now and what inspired you, what got you to where you are today.
Thanks, Jan. So it has been a journey. And I think it's a great way of putting it. It's a mosaic. It's a lot of experience put together. And sometimes it's over, you mentioned it's 30 years that I've been working in and around the financial services world in an area where we call real assets. So I invest in real estate, commodities, and infrastructure, some really important areas, especially for now, for the U.S. and globally. And I think, in terms of my passions from a personal level, I've always been interested in the environment. I've always championed the environment from when I was in high school, and I was the Speaker of the House for our New York State chapter of Youth in Government. I sponsored bills talking about protecting the oceans. So it's wonderful to be able to combine my personal passion with my profession. And so there's been some things that have really come into line the last couple of years that have really allowed me to do that.
And it's interesting, Caroline, because you write about your experience as a commodity trader and investors through really crazy cycles in our economy, from the oil peak to the U.S. shale revolution to trade wars and subsidies and the ever-present uncertainty of weather and our geopolitics and the climate and now the pandemic. What do you think for you is really different about this moment in time?
So I think in terms of climate, I think that individuals are feeling it firsthand. So it isn't, oh, well, it's happening over there or it's happening to those people. No, it's happening to everyone. And the impacts are wide ranging just from a GDP perspective. From an economic perspective, they're just massive. It's trillions of dollars that we have to spend because of weather volatility, and the personal impacts on people in the disruption of their lives. It's just becoming that people are that much more aware. So I think that's changed, and I think people's tolerance, for those things or they're not actually doing something themselves is just the time has passed.
And do you think, one of the things that we talk about also is that the pandemic has brought to light so much of the social injustices and the disparities. And, it was interesting at the beginning of the pandemic, we're like, well, this is an equal opportunity employer. But now as we're almost 4, if not a little bit longer months into it, we're really seeing some of the really hardcore disparities that are really surfacing that have always been here. But, to your point about really seeing it, do you think that's also contributing to how we're also really now seeing it?
I absolutely do. I think, again, things that maybe were tolerated or before or just not discussed. and that even just taking a passive role is not enough. Is that that people feel somewhat activist about what's happening, and they are feeling it personally, and that there are a lot of people out of work. I'm in New York City. It's personal. It's around us. We need to get people back to work, and we need to think about that, and we need to think about the work environment that we have in a place that has more diversity. And I think, what's interesting right now is that we have a chance to write the course in a couple different areas, specifically in the area that I look at most every day, which is the environment. We have a chance to, if we're going to spend money, to spend it in the path that goes towards environmentally social, correct alternatives. And we also have that perspective to do things from a diversity perspective when we think about jobs and employment that we actually do. We can make that change.
So you're dedicated to low carbon economy investments. Talk to us a bit about what that means.
So the low carbon economy is something that we're striving towards. So right now we have a very carbon heavy environment where it's really the result of 200 years of our industrial growth, of, like I'd say, like the first wave of industrial revolution, of where we created a lot of things and basic industry. We had a huge amount of progress, but we didn't really worry as much about the environmental impact of those things, or frankly, the sustainable impact, social or in governance. And so we're now looking and saying, there's probably a better way to do it. Technology has allowed us, in technological development, to do things in a better way. So to generate power in a more carbon friendly way, to lessen the impact that we have in terms of carbon dioxide emissions, which we know does impact climate and weather volatility. And we actually have the ability to change course on that.
Do you think that now, because of the pandemic, and maybe even when we think about the future of work, and that's something I'd love to talk to you about as well, what are we seeing, if there are any silver lining moments from the pandemic as it pertains to sustainability in the environment and climate change? Do you think that what we're seeing right now, in the sense of having fewer cars on the road, figuring out exactly, what's going to happen with supply chains, and will we move more production locally? Will that be a possibility? And, or is this a blip in time where it's just kind of one of those little hiccups? Right. And I know that we can't see, with the crystal ball, what's going to happen in the next 2 months, let alone the next 2 years. But, love to hear your insights on this.
That's really astute, Jen. And then it's happening every day that we're forced to travel less. We're not able to travel, so that, in order to do business, in order to see our loved ones, we have to use technology, and use the wonderful portal that we're on now, of which I've learned myself, how to become more adept at using. So I think a lot of those things will never go back fully to the way that they were, because now we have the ability to do them, and do them as efficiently, or if not more efficiently. And I speak, just economically, for, as an investor, I think about these things as positives, because the ability to make investments, to have money flow, to actually do business, without having to wait 2 weeks to make a meeting to talk to your colleagues in China is so dramatic. So that is a silver lining. The other silver lining, just from an environmental perspective, is that it has had a huge impact. Less travel, frankly, just less activity. We have cleaner air, we have cleaner water, we have species of fish that are coming back into areas that we haven't seen in decades, and this is only within a couple of months. So it is interesting to see that we can actually change the course pretty quickly and pretty dramatically.
So it's interesting. So I'm very passionate about all things related to ESG and social impact investing, as I know that you are obviously as well too. And I'm wondering, even before the pandemic hit, but we were starting to see tremendous growth in how the general public would think about ESG, even if we didn't quite understand fully what it meant, but wanting to align more of our purpose with our passion, with our dollars. And that was a theme even before the pandemic set. So let's talk pre-pandemic, and then we'll talk pandemic, and then we'll talk post-pandemic. Talk to us a bit about some of the trends that you were seeing even pre-COVID as it pertained to how ESG funds were performing and even outperforming the S&P 500.
Yeah, so interestingly, the ESG as a sector is the best performing sector of any, and that was the fourth quarter of last year and the first quarter of this year. And there's more money flowing into strategies that deploy ESG in their investment process than any other strategy. So there's proof in the pudding. The strategies are actually outperforming, and there's money that's coming into it. So meaning investors really do want these strategies. So that was happening, before COVID. I think, with COVID, we saw a clear demarcation of what sectors in the economy were going to be winners and losers, and, in terms of from an investment perspective. Clearly, technology has been a winner. Healthcare has been a winner. Environmental focused opportunities also a winner. And so, there's been a renewed interest, if we look at ESG as being a stalwart or a way to enact or have impact in each of those areas. It's a larger type of framework to use. So I think that now we've only accelerated that interest. And I think there are some investors that are putting money to work, and they're putting more money to work in those kind of strategies. I think there are a lot of investors that are on the fence, or that are looking for more stability in the economy. And so, I can imagine that as we emerge into next year, that this flow will only increase.
And so for those companies that are wanting to do better now, either because they feel like they have no other choice to be able to sustain themselves as a viable going business concern, or because they've at some level have had their own aha moments, as companies are made up of human beings. Do you think things like all the issues that we saw come out with the supply chains, for example, during COVID, and just how so many things just fundamentally broke down from how was PPP manufactured and distributed to our ability to get toilet paper at the grocery store, so many different ways, right? So I'm wondering, what is your take on how companies are going to have to rise to the challenge to really think about, particularly in a world now that seems so divided between, like, for example, the EU travel ban, right? And other places that we may not be able to travel to or to easily access. What's your take on that?
So we're actually seeing immediate financial results. So I think that, when you just, again, look at the perspective of that, even if you didn't care about any of these, the social benefits of, ESG investing, just from a profitability standpoint, it's instantaneous, and the marketplace, from an investor perspective, is looking at how companies are getting ahead of these things, how they're planning. So I think, what became very clear through COVID was that there was not a lot of scenario analysis when it came to some of the issues that we're facing, because there was really no precedent. So instantaneously, Wall Street's not the only barometer, but companies' stock prices were immediately affected. And again, in those winner categories where there was some planning ahead in terms of that, in different kind of scenarios and in different kind of environments, that they would rise to the challenge, you saw those stock prices increase. And so even, to the end of where we look today, that a lot of, the marketplace in terms of stock prices have actually come back, and a lot of the marketplace or a lot of companies have not. And they've kind of stayed in a place where they're, it's obvious that they need to do some work, in these categories. So I think it's just going to be it is the financial impact of profitability or not being profitable.
Let's talk about the S for a little bit in ESG, and the way in which you think that component of how we think about companies doing good will evolve over time.
So I'm talking a lot about profitability, but what makes a profitable company? It's your workforce. It's the people who come. That's my most precious commodity, at PANA LCE, is the people that work with me. And, if it is not an environment of where people feel that they're equal, they're getting paid equally, that they feel that their work is valued, that they can move up, in terms of the hierarchy, that's just the normal hierarchy. you're not going to be able to attract, the right kind of workers. I mean, the people that really are going to, make your company profitable. So I feel like that's going to be more and more pressing. And I feel like from a generational perspective, that some of the younger generations, the millennials, they really won't stand for it. There's just things that are priority to them that take precedence over profitability. So that working environment, that being heard, that having some flexibility in their lives to pursue their outside interests, that's really important. In fact, that's probably ranks higher to them than some of the monetary aspects. So I think we're going to see the change. And the last thing I'll say is, as well as from an environmental standpoint, millennials do care about that, and again, we'll place that ahead of some of the monetary gains, that might be had, or said in another way, the savings that might be had from, having, a food product that isn't organically made or isn't sustainable or isn't climate negative. So these things are becoming very important. They're playing out.
It's interesting because I think, over time in the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a hyper focus on the millennial market, and knowing that they are the future. And they're now, most of them are almost 40, which is hard to believe. But
that is hard, Dan. It's crazy.
But we also understand that I think it's about $72 trillion is going to transfer hands in the form of wealth transfer in the next 20 to 30 years max. And so that really does impact Gen X women and baby boomer women. So for those two generations, particularly for Gen Xers, which are still, in the height of their careers, how do you think this moment in time is really going to change, in particular, like how women think about their careers? Coupled with the fact that so many of the nation's, 47 million in Americans that have filed unemployment claims, women are overrepresented in each of those categories. So I think and we have this conversation a lot at Mayshad, that with many Gen Xers and baby boomers, like so many of us are really questioning, our place in the market as consumers, as spenders, as investors, and as it pertains to, how we further build upon our career, because, for many of us, we have many years left.
Completely. Well, there's so many things in there. And I think, just on the standpoint of just, personally what every, person can do, but let's just say women, is that it's their purchasing power. It's the power behind their dollars, and listen, part of that, the transference of wealth happening is from, patriarchs to matriarchs. And frankly, there are a lot of women that hold significant power when it comes to their dollars, where they invest it, where they give it, from philanthropic aspect, how they hire, who they hire. And I believe, and I would employ that every woman to think about that and to own it. And I mean, and it's much as to try to, and to feel bold and to lean into it, and I think there's more of the consumer world is clearly over the last couple of decades is clued into this, and that women do make decisions, and it is important to care about their preferences. So I believe that's underway, but I think that women should speak even louder about the things that they need, and when it comes to working, about the things that will enable them to have two jobs, to have a job outside of the home and in the home. And and I think services are popping up all over that can cater to help families, not just women, but families, to accommodate this two person household income, and the burdens it puts on you as a couple, or to your children and your elders. Your parents, because as we know, that has become a huge responsibility for all of us. So I think, dollars and interest in services and companies that are trying to help us to be able to manage all these things are going to be at the forefront. And I think more funds, frankly, that manage to actually investing in those type of companies is going to be really a big way forward. So I think, using your dollars, be aware of your power. And then I think, in the workforce, it's really, I hope, I mean, I work with it in terms of bringing a diverse slate to a workplace. That again, when it comes to this, like, ESG screening, or if you look at it from an investment perspective, is that, diverse groups at a table, investment table, or any decisions that are going to be made for a company, those are the ones that are most profitable. And I think it's been proven study after study academically, Harvard, Oxford, go through, believe it or not, but the proof is going to be in the pudding, and so that means we have to get those people at the table. So we have to hire them. And I feel like that inclusion will only be beneficial in terms of getting more diverse people to companies, because the numbers are they're off right now. They're not, they're not where they should be to have those voices be represented in these decisions. So we have a bit of a catch up to do.
Carolyn, I think I agree 2000% with everything you just said. And yet we also know that this data and all the research didn't just happen overnight, right? We're not just in the pandemic, and so we're realizing all of this. Like, much of this we actually knew beforehand as well. And, even to, today, there's some resistance to that, right? There's the resistance to the change. We know that just from a psychological perspective, change is hard. We get that. But then also, there's also so much data that backs up everything you just said, from, diverse teams, diverse women, having women and people of color on boards, and, at all different layers of the organization. And just, even from when we even look at COVID and we look at those countries who have fared better than others, often it's women who are leading those countries, right? And so the data is really there, but yet there's still some resistance. From your perspective, let's talk about that. Why do you think there's still some resistance to it, even though the data proves otherwise?
I think you nailed it, Jan. It's just, the unknown is scary, and historical performance, is something that hasn't been there. I mean, just in terms of people's personal interaction with diverse people in a work setting, in any setting, frankly, in a decision-making role, it's being, seen doing things that potentially these folks have not been seen doing. And I think that when the numbers become a little bit more even, and it's just the ease or the understanding of that, seeing how this relationship will work and getting comfortable with it, that I feel, a lot of the resistance goes away, because at the end of the day, we're human beings, and business gets done, by humans. There's technology, that happens, and I often get frustrated where I can't get someone at the bank, but it's human beings, and I think that understanding is going to come. It's just time, but I think it's a concerted effort to make sure that those relationships can foster, and I think any resistance that there is to it, I think there's also a perception of that, a zero-sum game. If someone else is gaining, then I'm losing, which is absolutely not the case. It's like 1 + 1 = 3 in these scenarios. So again, I think that's going to play out, and I think it is. I think that some of the younger generations already know that there's not something to prove. They already just inherently feel that. But I think we're on that course now.
I really like what you just said around 1 + 1 = 3, because I think you're absolutely right in the sense of it's not. And much of this also has to do with power, right? Like the fear of losing power and control. And we see this in so many different ways right now, particularly during an election year. And, through the lens of ESG and SRI investing and the work that you do, not just are we in 2020 experiencing a global pandemic, but then we're also going to soon be in the middle of an election. And we're already seeing some of the politicalization of what will be probably intensifying in the next few months around everything from, federal funding to disputes and debates between governors and mayors of certain cities and certain states, and just, the different ways in which the pandemic is affecting different populations differently, even down to whether or not one wears a mask. And so I'm wondering, in the work that you do, how will this year, particularly given that it's an election year, even further refine or define the work that you do with your group?
So when it comes to environment, there is a lot at stake. I mean, even through the last administration, which I mean, I think when people think of the environment, they think of more liberal tending types of thought, from philanthropy, or even from investments, which is really not the case. Like that's a misnomer. I think people care about this issue and there are returns in this issue. However, it's about dollars. It's about federal dollars, and there's a lot of stimulus packaging and discussions that are underway that have already been implemented, and then more on the way to actually help us get ahead in the economy and putting people back to work, repurposing, real estate and opportunity zones, and really working on our core infrastructure as a country. I think that's something I feel so passionate about, is that we have a graying of our trains, buses, roadways. I mean, this has been happening for decades already. But I think the dollars will be put in place to enable the economy to grow and get those things in place. And for me, it's why wouldn't those be placed towards more sustainable type of work rather than non-sustainable projects. I think what's at stake, or I guess it's more of an opportunity cost, is that we don't do that, because we have that opportunity, and also to think about it in an inclusive way. So, like from a portfolio perspective at PANA, is that we look at our work as inclusive. We're looking to transition portfolios to a low carbon economy. We're not looking to replace existing portfolios or basically get rid of certain types of companies, fossil fuel companies. That's not the approach that we take. We think about how those companies are transitioning themselves, and I think it's a holistic path that every part of the economy is on, and so I hope that continues. And I think again, even in light of the administration that we've been in, we've had those things be in place. We've had incentive programs that have been put in place so that we can give grants to technologies in this space. We can provide money towards projects in this space. So we have tax credits that enable these sustainable projects. So I hope that continues. I don't really see, I think there's only a scenario where that actually increases and then gets better rather than goes the other way.
You talk about your goal in democratizing ESG. Let's talk about that. What do you mean by that?
So, it's interestingly, if you have a passion or want to make a mission-driven investment, let's just say for diversity or healthcare or environment, it's very hard to find a financial product that delivers that kind of impact, or even attempts to. And when I say that, I mean at the means of where not every person has access, to the stock market. In fact, there's a very small proportion of Americans that are even invested in the stock market. But for those that could do that, if you go to your Vanguard or maybe some of a smaller platform, it's very hard to find an investment strategy that's geared towards that. So my aim with PANA over the next couple of years, decade, I mean for the rest of my career and as it lives on, is that more individuals would get access to strategies like this, and for whatever means that it could be. If I want to get more people involved in the markets, but that they would have access to make this choice. And I think that the way that the alternate to the stock market is as a consumer, and it's the way do I have a choice on the shelf? Can I buy chicken that's carbon free, or can I buy a T-shirt that's made with fiber that came from carbon dioxide and was repurposed? Can I buy a vehicle that's powered by liquid hydrogen? I think that's going to end. And can I buy those things at the same cost as ones that do not, or less? And the answer is going to be yes, you can. And that's the next wave. And I think, and that's where everyone's going to be involved. And so we're just at the very beginning of it.
It's interesting. And I'm also wondering at the same time, like what you just described, playing devil's advocate to this now for a second, even though I agree with everything you just said, but, I can imagine that, there may be resistance to becoming more aware as a consumer because it takes more time, right? And so when you're, a professional woman now living during this period of time too, when time is, a very precious resource, and you may be doing things, for your family, with your family, and not having the support mechanisms or the support teams that you may have had in place before pre-COVID, which, who knows where that's going to play out in the future. But it takes time to become a better, more informed consumer as well. Mm-hmm. And do you find that there will be continued enhancement in resources to help us know, for example, from end to end, where was that article of clothing that we're putting on our bodies, or the seafood that we're putting in our mouths, just help us to understand, from the moment in time that something is brought to the market, how do we really know? How can we become better informed and better educated ourselves?
Yeah, so it's even like it's like a seal of approval. When you organic, there's an organic stamp, and people can actually train themselves to go into a supermarket and be able to see it out of the corner of their eye. That has some accountability. That in terms of where the supply chain, where things were sourced, that through that whole supply chain, that it was kept in the sustainable manner. I think we're going to have more and more of that. I think there's more interest. I think it comes from, again, generationally, just being used to, being aware at a younger age to choose those kind of items and choose them. And that's so when you're, older, like myself, that's just the way that you've always done things, so I think there is a learning curve for those of us that haven't grown up with this train of thought through everything, through this technology, all of these changes. I think there's a lot of really astute marketing groups out there that are really working on this, and that there are branding people who are just, there to educate and make people aware, and in a good way of a non-judgmental way, not you should do this or that. But these are some of the things that are out there. And I think people are going to be, I think they'll be more receptive exactly if that, that there's a non-dollar, kind of choice. Even if there was, where we've seen in Europe, that people do choose, and to an extent in the States, they do choose some of these choices, even though they cost more money.
Well, and I think we're all used to supporting our local small businesses, for that exact reason, that even though prices may be a tad bit higher in some instances, because many small merchants aren't able to achieve the economies of scale of some of the big box retailers, but many of us actually prefer to shop local because we know that it's directly going into the pockets of people that are actually a part of your community, right? And so that I think that there may be even in the sense of shifting mindsets around, particularly now going forward, everything that we think about in the sense of I think that we're using this moment in time to really step back and think about how we spend money, right? And no matter if we've been affected economically or not by the pandemic, but really using this moment in time, because what we're realizing is that, for the most part, I think most of us are spending less money, right? We may not be going out for dinners or going out to shows or going out to all those places and spaces where people would normally congregate. All of those things cost money, right? And so I think that there's already something that's starting to happen at a sea change level, where we're starting to see more attention paid to wanting to spend money on companies that are doing good things.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And I think there it is. I hope there's some savings, for everyone, in that, as you were talking about, some silver linings, in what's happening, balanced by, some of the other elements of the economy. But I think that you're right. People are having the choice, or maybe an opportunity to have the time to think about some of these choices and the dollars, and just by virtue of the fact that they can't spend it on certain areas. So I do agree. And that's what harkening back to another question you had about, will things fundamentally change? Will some, industry groups and sectors be forever changed? Absolutely. And I think, again, being part of the kind of this macro focus on, the E, S, and the G, it's what a great time to do this, because there is a shifting preference in terms of dollars, or people are potentially open to it. So I think this is the time. This is the tipping point.
Let's talk a bit also about the role that women and men have to support other women who launch companies. And you spent time as an angel investor. And I'm wondering, what are some of your biggest aha moments for you during that time, both for the the way in which perhaps women approach launching and growing and scaling companies differently. And then also from your own personal reflections, what did you learn about yourself during this moment in time?
Well, I think for me personally, it was I put my dollars, where my interests were, and I felt like that was the best way to support, no, not just women, I mean, but just the causes that I was interested in. But specifically from an investment standpoint, that's the way that I've always done things, is investing in women-led companies and women-led investment firms. Number one, so never afraid to do that. Just thinking about things. Being a little bit more risk on in my approach, getting comfortable with things, but knowing that there were some things that, I think were just moving in the right direction, so just, moving with that. And then also just, in my day to day and the people that I interact with, so the people that I work with and that I look to hire, I look to be, coworkers with, the partners I have on the investment side, I'm looking for diverse people, very much so. I mean, again, coming back to that argument that diverse teams make the best choices. And I have blind spots up the wazoo, my family will tell you, and my colleagues. And, and the only way to ensure that I'm not, biased, in terms of the way I'm thinking about an investment or about just other things about a person, or is to have those opinions around me. So I vote, I vote with my wallet, I vote, with my actions. And, and if it's not just that, it's just supporting, groups that are doing good work, like your group, which it's amazing. And it's just, listen, having a dialogue, being able to have people to talk to about all these things. I think that's tremendous. Having a voice. And I think the last thing is just, and, for whatever fears that any of us have, and all of us have fears, doesn't matter who you are, is to try to face those, and to be bold, kind of, and put things out there little by little, just taking little steps and little strides. It does make a difference, and feeling then comfortable. And that's how you get comfortable.
Thank you for that. I think that there's something really important for women that are watching the show today to really think about it. And also, I mean, honestly, the men that support and champion equity for women professionally and personally as well, is that, I think that many of us are really using this moment in time to think through, what does my career mean to me? What is my identity right now? How can I make change happen in the world? But how can I also balance the self-care aspect of it? That for many women, that's a hard component, just in good circumstances, right? So we would love to get your advice on, balance during this moment in time. In a world that seems to be shifting every single day. Because I think this is really a moment in time to really think about doing something differently. But then also, how can we as women help to support other women achieve their goals too, but still really take care of ourselves, right? And not put too much pressure on ourselves to be the end all and be all to everything right now, which is, I think, often what highly accomplished women want to do.
Absolutely. I mean, the control element is key. We were talking about control, of people wanting to control certain situations. And, I think, women, it's not every woman, but that's part of it, of which we live in an uncertain time. We live on uncertain days, and literally taking it day by day. So just as background, I am a yoga instructor. I got my certification about 13 years ago. And, it was life-changing for me, and it continues to be, just in terms of the way I can approach the challenges of every day and trying to stay in the moment and being mindful. And it's like, what do those words even mean? Breathing, taking a breath, taking a moment, just inhale, exhale, resetting. I think it's so key, just very small things about then how you can go and then address something. And if it's where it is an overwhelming situation of just, trying to break it down, asking for help. I think that's part of, first being mindful of that, we can only do so many things during the day, and that, being harried and being, scheduling 10 things when you can only do 2 is, you're going to basically do 10 things pretty poorly. It's just the way, it's just impossible to ignore that, especially for a long period of time. You may be able to get away with it for a little bit, But so just stepping back and thinking what's realistic and what you can really do to be successful. Like, how many things can you actually focus on? How many things can you do successfully? And again, this isn't a recipe. This isn't a recipe for everybody. But I think that that's an important thing. And so when you can take a moment and you can listen to yourself and kind of make those assessments, and then when you realize, wow, I'm doing 10 things and I have to do those 10 things because they're not just work related, they're home related, they're parent related, asking for help. Okay, asking for help. It's huge. I mean, it's a journey that I've been on for 30 plus years of finally learning that, I don't need to do everything myself, or not, and not expecting that I would. And also, not only doing everything myself, but being of service to others. And I think that's a key element for women. It's a key element for a lot of people. And it's the way I viewed my personal life and my professional life, being of service. And at times, it's time to just do it for yourself, and to think about what you need to do that. And it's okay. It is okay. It's the right way forward, and it can be scary, and asking for things is certainly scary. What if I got a no? Oh, no. I mean, I think these are things that we all go through. Well, a no is the first, step to the yes. That's what I say a lot. So, being, feeling brave enough, and have mind enough to ask for the things and move forward, and to put yourself at the top of the pile and say, listen, it's the analogy like on the plane, if you don't put on your life mask first, you can't help your child or the person next to you. Well, ding, ding, so, not being afraid to do that, asking for help, asking for, people around you, standing up in any of these circumstances, and listen and seeing where the chips fall. Because it's very interesting, when you step away and say, ooh, I did that. So it's just a few things.
It's so fascinating what you just said around asking for help, because that is something that so many of us struggle with. And I think in ways that we're not even always aware or conscious, in the power of having your network and your ecosystem around you for whatever comes your way. Right. And I think that in many different ways, we know that girls and boys are socialized very differently from birth to, the moment in time they enter into adulthood. And there's so much research around that, from how girl babies versus boy babies are even held differently by their mothers. Right. And just the socialization of, jumping to when you walk into a Toys R Us. I don't even know if that brand still around, Toys R Us?
It's not, unfortunately. I was really sad. We got through the bankruptcy sale. We got some good things in my house, but yeah.
I remember, walking into Toys R Us stores. Our producer's saying that they actually came back, so Toys R Us is back. But advice to Toys R Us, like the blue shopping aisles and the pink shopping aisles, that's something you need to reinvent.
Absolutely.
But we are socialized very differently and more experiential than retail is the feedback that we're getting. Well, that's interesting. That'd be interesting to see how they've evolved and pivoted, particularly during this moment in time. But I think it's, fascinating that, one of the things that women don't do well, and I think there are a lot of different reasons for this. I think partly because we're always asked to do so much and, socialized to put others' needs ahead of ours sometimes. And, to think that if we keep our head down and we work and we work and we work, our contributions will be seen and valued and recognized and celebrated. And we know that a large part of it is really ensuring that you have that network, that tribe around you 24/7, so that you may not need it today, you might not need it tomorrow or next month, but at some point you will need it, and then it's there for you. And I think I'm being very stereotypical now, but I think that men learn how to do that differently, even from childhood, in the sense of their tribe, their friends, their social social circles. But I think that this is also, that opportunity to, going back, Caroline, to what you said around like really challenging yourself through, just taking little sticks, dipping your toe into the water from time and time again, just to really be able to practice around asking for help, because it's big, it's considerable. And when you think about, those companies that are founded by men that grow in scale, they don't do it on their own, right? And so really for them, they really take it takes a village phrase to a whole different level, in the sense of, how they build companies and how they grow and how they scale and how they, do better, whatever better means to them, right? From a profitability perspective. I think that women, particularly in this moment in time, we have so much to learn from each other and from other men who still embody the same values and the core ethics and the passion that we may want to exude as well, but to not just learn from other women, but also to learn from men, which I think is really important. I would love to get your thoughts on that too.
That's one of my favorite topics, because, again, when you think it's just about the numbers of like it's just numbers, who's successful or who's leading companies and who's on boards and it's majority men. And what is their path to success, and what are the attributes that they have or they've done, the things that you see are successful, in their environment, without sacrificing your own authenticity and your integrity. I think it's interesting to take the notes. And then most importantly, I think for me, it's been speaking up to the men in your immediate circle, and that the ones that are trainable, frankly, or, in some ways that really they want for a more diverse group. They maybe don't know how to get there, and they maybe don't know that some of the actions or the ways or their company or their own network does things are not conducive to that diversity. And so it's just speaking up, saying, listen, I just want to share some things with you that, like, this is my experience. This is what's happening with me. I would love it if you could help me to do this, XYZ, again, asking for help. And I think that because part of the issue is to be part of the solution as a woman. And if we don't say anything, I don't know how. People aren't mind readers, in any way. How could they possibly know? So I think that it's so imperative, that we bring, the men in our lives on board, into the work that we're doing, and make them aware. Like, don't keep them outside. And I think that's the way we're going to make real strides is awareness. And I think it comes from us. I think there are, again, generationally, I think that there's just different ideas about, who does what, in relationships or at work, with some of the younger generations, it's frankly more equal, or there's just like a gender blind lens on it. It doesn't exist, for people that are older generations. It's just the way they've been conditioned. So we just, we need, we kind of need to say something. And then the other thing that we can do that I didn't mention before, you asked me about what women can do, is, we can advocate for each other. So, my favorite thing to do is when, I'm with a group of women, at a dinner or at any what kind of work function, is to go around the room and ask everyone what they need. Tell me something that you need, personally or professionally, and that we'll see if anyone around the table can help. And using your network and absolutely trying to get something done for someone. And again, it comes back to like realizing that you have power and that you actually can do it. It's pretty phenomenal. So it's just a couple things, I think that we all as women can do.
I like the question, because we many times in our conversations we dance around that, right? We dance around it, and then it becomes very, very vague around, either asking for help or offering to give help, right? But I really like what you said around what do you need, because then it's very concrete and it's very precise and it's very exact.
Exactly. And again, and that's what happens, I think, informally, with other folks, and maybe with men, in terms of the way that they socialize and get together and watch a baseball game, or which women, we love baseball too, and we watch games and but together again, but it's more like, and I need this, and hey, do you mind talking to so and so about this? I really would appreciate it. And it's like, no problem. Like there's a tacit understanding about favors and having a relationship with people that includes that, and that it's not. It's just like normal relationship stuff. It isn't, it shouldn't be terrifying although for me personally, it has been terrifying in the past. It still is sometimes for me to ask for something. I'm raising a fund. I need some capital. Oh, everything's just great. Oh, no, we need an investment, and so, and for others, and it's not, again, just, a gender metrics, but, being comfortable, having those knowing that you have that relationship, that you've honed it over years, why wouldn't you feel comfortable, in asking something, like that? So it's, but again, these are like acquired skills. These are not necessarily what you're born with.
Yeah, it definitely takes practice and courage, and honestly thinking through it from let's put it into perspective, right? Like, what is the worst that could happen, right? You ask for something and you just don't get it, and you ask someone else.
Exactly. I think that's true. And similarly, there's the path to yes is no, and even just like getting to hear that a couple times and just, okay. And then just taking a few moments, maybe even a day, like just to like process it and be like, all right, no, right. So let me ask the next person, and, and then the next person, and, and just keeping through figuring, I won't go into the nuts and bolts of like, my asset raising strategy, but just, like honing it down, like, well, if no, well, why, what objections might you have? Or there's something about my presentation or, this and that, like, please share it with me. Please, share your advice, share your feedback, not being afraid to say the thing. We're learning. It's all a feedback loop of, of then, and then maybe the next time it will be a yes, or maybe you have to go do a little more research, to get to the yes, whatever it is. But yeah, it is like, boy, what was the hardest thing? It was the worst thing that happened. Not a lot, so.
Well, in some ways we already do this in other aspects of our lives, right? So for those of us out there who may be single or have been single at some part of our adult lives, which is really all of us, right? When you think about, the constant rejection that one often experiences on dating apps, for example, right? So you literally sometimes have to kiss a lot of toads to get to the prince, right? Or when we go out and apply for 100 jobs, right? And we may get callbacks for maybe 2 or 3 companies that actually want to interview us. Right? So there's a lot of no's before we get to the yes. And so maybe it's even partly like shifting the mindset in the sense of, okay, so I already have experienced rejection before in different ways, and I've been okay from it, right? Like I've been able to further refine like who my ideal soulmate may or may not be, right? What my ideal company or my ideal job may or may not be, right? And I think that there's a way in which you can transfer sort of that emotionalness around those experiences for women to be more confident and be more certain around getting comfortable with the icky, right? Getting comfortable with the messy.
I think you nailed it. It's just trying and getting comfortable with some feedback. The worst that you can do is not to say something and not to try, because I'll tell you right there, you're never getting what you think you want, and honing in through those very brave, trying experiences as to what you do want, like as you rightly put, like what do you want from, a mate, a relationship, a company, a job, a philanthropic endeavor, it's best if you don't know, believe me, the people that are surrounding by you, they're not going to tell you, and you're not going to be helping them, so the quicker you get clear on what you want, the quicker then you can say, no, actually, that's not right. That's not right for me. I think that's a really good point you bring up, Jan, is like recognizing when things are not optimal for you and saying, you know what, they're not, and that's okay. I'm going to find the right thing. I'm going to move on, because I can't tell you how many times, and I think probably we've all had this, this experience from a professional perspective of how long we stick with, with things, or from a dating perspective, because I did date for a long time before I got married, sticking with things you just knew were not right. Or even if you didn't know, there was an inkling, and it was like, and paralysis of not doing anything. I don't even know, hoping that things would get better. What? No, that's not what's going to happen, and it's just, it takes such courage to just say, you know what, this isn't right, and just getting off the train. And believe me, I'm sorry I'm going on a little bit, but I know all the reasons why, especially from a working perspective, like being, a working mom or the breadwinner, or like, or being single and like needing this job. I mean, but I can tell you, that there's something better out there, and that while it seems scary, and while you're thinking about it, is that you will be able to transition. You will be able to do it, and by virtue of you staying with something that isn't right, you ultimately are not going to be successful wherever it is, in being, happy, and, or monetarily. I mean, I don't mean to go on, but when I found that I wasn't, the job wasn't right for me, I found a way of like sabotaging it, no matter what, even if it wasn't like outright. So believe me, these things come out, and if it's not in the work, it's at home, it's whatever it is. But I'll tell you, it's not gonna be optimal. So say something, and ask people around you, for some advice.
And that is great advice, Carolyn. Thank you so much for your insights and your expertise and just your passion. And we'd love to have you back and again, because I know that we're at the top of the hour now, but I know that we could talk for at least another hour, if not a couple. So we'd love to continue this conversation. Thank you so much for being with us here today. Really appreciate your contribution.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks so much. Thanks for giving me a voice.
Thank you. So please make sure to stay tuned for all of our upcoming episodes. We run, as you know, each week, Women and Money. We also do a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion show, and we do Workshop Wednesdays. And each and every week, we kick off the Week for Success with Dr. Risa Riker, one of our investors and clinical psychologists, who helps us stay grounded and sane and healthy and happy and productive during this crazy moment in time. If you would like to learn more about how you can become a member of Mayshad and all of the activities and perks that are reserved just for members, please make sure to join us at joinmayshad.com. I'm Jan Mercer-Dahms, the Vice President of U.S. Development with Join Mayshad. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.